I get pulled kicking and screaming into politics every 12 years, and this is one of those years, obviously. I guess the best way to start is to tell you how I got involved in this movement. I'm, like Ken, a Hendrix College graduate, a little bit older, just a tad. But we might be the only two Hendrix College graduates that aren't flaming liberals, but that's the way it is. I got a call in 1991 from my brother. My brother works nationally for Initiative and Referendum. And if you don't know what Initiative and Referendum is, it is a blessing that the state of Arkansas has. We're one of 23 states that has the ability to bring an initiative or an amendment to the ballot without the help of the legislature. It's real citizen government. Governor Donaghy, 114 years ago, rode around the state on a horse to campaign for initiative and referendum. We have it here. There's some states that would love to have it. But as citizens, it is a blessing, and we need to keep it. Amen. My brother helps states around the country do that. And he called me and said, "Tim, what do you think about term limits? Because there's a guy from Benton, Arkansas, and a guy from Cabot, Arkansas, that have written an amendment that is going to limit the terms of Arkansas elected officials." And I said, "Well, you know, I love term limits for president. It doesn't matter who it is. Nobody needs to be that powerful. But I have a few questions. Doesn't it limit our choice?" And he came back with this. He says, "Never in our lifetime, before term limits that is, had more than half the legislators even had an opponent in November." Never in our lifetime. That's not much of a choice. If there's one person on the ballot, it's not a choice. So I thought that made sense. And there's another thing. I said, "Well, what about the expertise?" And after he stopped laughing, he said you could pick people randomly off the sidewalk to go to Washington. We wouldn't be $17 trillion in debt. This expertise that they talk about there, it's not real expertise. It's not the expertise that Ken was talking about working in a restaurant. It's not the expertise that we all have raising families and having budgets. We don't need political expertise. That's not what this country's about. It's about a citizen legislator. George Washington stepped down, not because he wasn't the best candidate. He stepped down after 2 terms because he wanted to set a precedent. He wanted to show that this is a shared responsibility. And there were some other issues. What about the clout? Won't we lose clout if we don't have experienced legislators? What about Senator McClellan? Longtime Arkansas senator in Washington. Would we have the McClellan-Kerr navigation system if it wasn't for his clout? I always used to hear that when debating, and I didn't know what to answer until I researched it. He did that in his first term. His first term. Ken, you and I know a legislator that's up there right now, Mr. Alan Kerr. Alan Kerr got rid of the double dipping that was going on in the state. That is somebody retiring from a legislative post and then taking another post, getting the retirement and the pay at the same time, even though they weren't retired. He did that in his first term. He didn't need a lot of expertise. He just needs common sense. So I made the mistake of saying, yes, I'll help him. And we had a bunch of people together, about 6 of us, had no political experience whatsoever in 1992. I guess I left the room for coffee, but when I came back, I was the statewide petition director. And I went around the state, and I couldn't believe it. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no expertise. And people were grabbing that petition out of our hand and asking if they could sign twice. Can I take a copy to my husband? Can I take this to my church? In July of that year, we became the second time in Arkansas history that an all-volunteer effort reached the ballot. Not one legislator helped us. Not one paid petitioner was used. All volunteer effort, got 100,000 signatures around this state. We made the ballot. Second time in Arkansas history that happened. No political expertise. I could tell you the mistakes we made. It was foolish. But we had the issue that mattered. And that's what matters. It's the ideas and the ideals. In November of that year, we got 500,000 Arkansans to say yes to term limits. The largest yes vote in Arkansas history on a ballot issue. That's historic. Now, what do you think? It was 60% of the vote. Bill Clinton ran at the same time, only got 53%. That's how powerful term limits was in this state. That's how much we yearned for term limits. It had really grabbed Arkansans by the heart. What do you think the legislators who are supposed to defend the Constitution and represent their constituents, how do you think they reacted to that? Applauding us? No. Most people don't know this because it was really flew under the radar. The press was much like they are in Washington today. The legislature went to court and asked that our vote be canceled. Anybody know that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what they did. They went to court and asked that our vote be canceled. 500,000 Arkansans canceled, voided.
On what grounds?
We didn't know. The voters didn't know what they were doing. The only evidence they had was that they were elected. It was a little joke. But that's what the people that were supposed to represent us and the people that were supposed to defend the Constitution did. And it goes on today. In 2004, fortunately, the end of that was that they lost 7-0 in the Arkansas Supreme Court, and term limits stayed in the Arkansas Constitution. And I think it's worked well. Let me tell you a few things it's done. There were some families in East Arkansas that had owned that seat for over 100 years. That was over. Seniority, where 5 legislators really ran that place, that was over. More women, more racial diversity. For the first time in Arkansas history, there was less than half of the legislature were lawyers. First time in Arkansas history. We had real experience there. Not political experience, real experience. People that have run businesses. People that have done budgets. In 2004 was the first time I came to Monticello, Arkansas. Because I had to debate term limits. Because in 2004, the legislature put something on the ballot and they said, we want to enact term limits. What? Term limits were already enacted. But they said they wanted to enact term limits. We said, you're wanting to extend term limits. They actually want to double their term. You want to extend term limits. You want to lengthen term limits. You want to double your terms. That's not what they said on the ballot. It said to enact term limits. And we thought, here they're trying to fool people. We went around the state, and we finally gave it enough publicity where I think people knew what they were voting on. And it was a choice between doubling their term or keeping the term limits that we had already voted on. We didn't win by 60%, we won by 70%. Term limits were loved by the people of Arkansas, and they saw through what the legislature was doing. This was a self-serving bill. What do you think the reaction to that is? You think, well, that people love term limits, let's live with it. No. No, but
what percentage?
70. Now, we've heard recently that 51% in 2004 was a mandate, 53% in 2008 was a mandate. Mandate! What's 60%? What's 70%? We didn't say term limits. We didn't shout term limits. We roared term limits. But they have still not accepted the vote. And that's what it comes down to. They haven't accepted our vote. You know that some of these legislators have won by 1%. In Conway, less than 100 votes. But they demand to take their seat. And guess what? They deserve to take their seat. That's the rules we live by. If you win by 1 vote, you deserve to have your seat. Well, term limits didn't win by 1 vote. Term limits was a landslide in this state. But they still haven't accepted and honored that vote. And we're asking that the legislature honor the vote and respect the voters. That's what we want them to do. This time they've learned something. They've learned that if they put term limits on the ballot, they lose because people love term limits. So let's not put it on the ballot. Let's stick it on the 16th page of a 22-page bill that says ethics. Oh, and I know what we'll do. Let's not even say term limits anywhere in the title. Yeah, that's what we'll do. And that's exactly what they've done. Their suggested name is the Voter Ethics and Transparency Bill. Now, we think it might have term limits. The Secretary of State has named it, and I think term limits comes as the 139th and 140th word in the ballot title. Does anybody know? Does anybody read 16 pages into a ballot title?
No.
Or into an amendment? Well, you better, or you won't know what you're voting on. This is what our legislature, not some crooks that came into town in the middle of the night. This is what the people that we voted to represent us have done. This is what Ken Yang's opponent has done. Miss Lee has voted for it on numerous occasions, got it out of committee, made sure. Told me I was the only person that spoke against the amendment because nobody was supposed to know this was going on. She told me I wasn't here to admonish the legislature. Should have said, well, yeah, I am. That's what we have coming. It's going to be called an ethics amendment. Here's the kicker. They've passed a rule now that they don't even have to call it an amendment. It will not be called an amendment. It's going to amend the Constitution of the state of Arkansas, but it will not be called an amendment. It'll be called an issue.
What?
An issue. First time in history, in Arkansas history, that an amendment's not even going to be called an amendment anymore. You know, I know good people that are on both sides of this issue. I love term limits because I think it's limited government. And I think limited government is why this country is great. If you think about it, we're not smarter than everybody else. You can see test scores, and that's just not true. We're not better behaved than everybody else. We've got more people in prison in this country than anywhere else on earth. We're not more religious. We don't have more natural resources. We are the most prosperous nation on earth for one reason, is that because 200 years ago, some very imperfect people decided for the first time in human history that they would limit their government and allow the human spirit to soar and prosper and thrive. Term limits is limited government. Limited terms, it goes hand in hand. Well, we're asking the voters of this state to rise up. And as I was going to say, good people disagree on this issue. I have friends that aren't necessarily for term limits. But I relish the opportunity to debate whether it should be 3 years in the Senate, or 3 terms in the House, 4 terms in the House. Let's debate. That's what good people do. They give their arguments, they tell why their issue is important, and then we make the decision as voters. We don't hide. People that hide things are ashamed. People that hide things are cowards. And that's what our legislature is doing right now. They're being cowardly. They're afraid of you, the voter, and they'd rather get something passed and not let you know about it. I relish a debate about this issue, but first of all, we got to let people know that it's on the ballot. It's not going to be an amendment, even though it will amend the state constitution. People that vote this way don't deserve to be legislators. I'm not saying they're bad people. They don't deserve to be legislators. We need honor up there. We need respect for the voters. And we've asked them to do just two things. Just respect the voter and honor the vote that we've already had twice in the state. If you want to help us, you can go to Save AR Term Limits. SaveARTermLimits.org. Lynn, there's a pad next to you. If people want to keep up with us, if they would put their name on that list right there and their email address, if you just pass that around, if you want to be kept up with what we're doing and where we're going around the state, please put your name on that list. We need help. We need help. We need you to tell your neighbors. We need to tell your friends. We need to talk to the press. We have gotten hardly any press about this.
Do you have on this website, do you have the facts that you just gave us?
Mm-hmm.
You do? Okay.
We got the vote in both chambers of the legislature as well. How you're I hate to call them your representative because they're not representing you anymore. And if you think they're going to listen to you when they have terms that go 16 years, because what they've asked, it's 2 paragraphs on page 16 of a 22-page amendment. It's not an issue, it's an amendment. Goes from 6 to 16 years in the House, 8 to 16 years in the Senate. Like I say, if the people of Arkansas want longer terms, that's what we need to have, because we need to honor the vote and respect the voters. But you can't fool us.
Tim,
Yes, sir.
Eddie Cheatham and all of the state representatives in southeast Arkansas voted to put this on the ballot as it is. So they're all guilty.
It's true.
And,
It's true.
and it's called the ethics, vote ethics,
It's
voter ethics and trans.
This is what the legislature has asked that it be called. Fortunately, the Secretary of State has named it, and we might sue him because we don't like his name either. But at least it has term limits as the 139th word and the 140th word. Who reads that long when you're going
If that's a title?
That's a title.
140 words?
Yes.
But it's, okay. But is it an issue or a bill or how is it?
They've named
Or a
it.
number?
They've named it an issue.
Issue.
It is an amendment to the Constitution of the state of Arkansas.
Okay, got that. Okay.
You're saying what's going to be on the ballot is not going to be the same as is published on the Arkansas State website, where it's referred to as Amendment of 2014.
Is that what they called it? Amendment of 2014?
This is Joint House Resolution 1009.
Mm-hmm.
It starts off, it says, be it resolved by the House of Representatives and the 89th General Assembly of the State of Arkansas, and B, the Senate and majority of all members elected to each House agree hereto.
Mm-hmm. That's
Section 1, this amendment shall be known and may be cited as, quote, the Arkansas Elected Officials Ethics, Transparency, and Financial Reform Amendment of 2014.
That's it.
Is that,
That's what they've.
can the Secretary
That's
of
what they
State
named it.
deviate from this?
Yes.
And
Yeah, we think. One thing that the Arkansas legislature did in this last session was not only attack term limits, but they've attacked initiative and referendum and how amendments and issues are named. So we're really not sure how it's going to be named. The Secretary of State thinks he can name it. They've taken that away from the Attorney General, but I think they've now given it back to him after that was passed. So the Attorney General cannot change that according to the legislature. We will probably file suit to try to stop this, try to stop that name right there. But we're still trying to raise money to do that.
well, if it doesn't show in the issue title
Mm-hmm.
that appears on the ballot,
Right.
would that be
Cause for
legitimate or cause to have it thrown out, like some of the last 2 years ago, some of the gaming
Right.
amendments?
We hope it is, but the courts, even though it says it to do it exactly opposite, the courts gives the legislature a lot more leeway. If a citizens initiative would have been named like that, they would have laughed us out of court. You can't fool people like that. But the legislature has given a lot more latitude on stuff like that from the court. So we're not sure how the court would rule on that, but we still think we should challenge it. But we're not going to challenge it until the legislature's out of session, because we don't want to challenge it and then change it and then we have to re-challenge it.
Exactly. Wait.
Yeah,
So-
we'll have
so
to
maybe
wait.
you take your action in steps, what I was really
Right.
wondering about.
Right.
I think I'm in safe company here, but I think maybe you don't want to spill the word too early on, because it would then get double reviewed to make sure that the title to this issue or amendment, ever how it's worded,
Well,
is
we hate the
legitimately.
right. We hate the deceptive nature on it. If they would put term limits, we want to lengthen our terms. I'm okay with that because we win. Because people know what they're voting on, and I know people don't want to keep those people in the legislature longer.
But there's another issue in here that you haven't even talked about.
And what's that?
So it fairly gets my attention. It's the, I had a
Just the
record.
pay raise
It was the 7-person commission,
to raise the pay
Independent Citizens Commission, I believe is the phrase that was used,
Yeah.
to be appointed.
by the
2 by the
legislature.
governor, 2 by President Pro Tem, 2 members by the House Speaker, and 1 member by the judiciary that would
Right.
set salaries for
Right.
all of the elected officials.
Right.
That's nowhere reflected in this title.
No. This will cost look at the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. It's 1 sentence. This is 22 pages. This will cost $1 million they have to publish this legally by law. It'll cost the state $1 million just to publish an amendment that long. The law,
4 times, isn't it?
Yeah.
3, 4?
4. It's a pig of an amendment, if you pardon my language. It needs to go. They could have gotten rid of this session if they wanted to. They don't want to. And you hear legislators now say, oh yeah, I'm going to vote against it. They're the ones that put it on there.
Yeah.
They're not going to vote against it. They want it to be there. They did that. I've heard every oh, Tim, I didn't even know we were voting on that. I wasn't, how did I vote yes? I wasn't even there that day. We've heard all the dog ate your homework excuses on this thing. These people are deceptive. That's the only word for it. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I don't have a dog in the fight. But I don't like deceptive language. Be honest with the voters. Just be honest with us. That's all we're asking. And when we say it's 70%, get the message. I was on Huckabee's show a few weeks ago, and Governor Huckabee has always been great on this issue. Don't agree with him on everything, but he's always been great on this issue. They came to him to try to do this in 2004, and this is what he told them. He said, citizens, not legislators, not government officials, citizens went all around this state and got 100,000 signatures. I won't support a repeal of this bill until you legislators do that same thing. You go all around the state. You get 100,000 signatures from 75 different counties in this state. Show them that you have real support, because that's the deal. They don't have any support for this. That's why they won't put it on the ballot in an honest way. Lobbyists hate term limits. Legislators hate term limits. The rest of us are for them. We are still waiting for the first lobbyist organization anywhere in this country to support term limits. And I only say that because legislators will say, oh, the lobbyists have too much power. Not one lobbyist organization in the history of this movement has ever supported term limits. It's because it makes their job harder. They're not kingmakers with term limits. They've actually just got to inform you about the issue and hope you vote their way. They're there what they're supposed to do. They're an information source.
I sent Sheila Lampkin a personal, I taught in the school district with Sheila for all my career here in Monticello. I sent her a personal note asking her to help us get rid of this term limits issue. And she said, it's already on the ballot, I can't do anything about it. You can educate the people though.
You have to educate them pretty good because she hasn't even attempted to. She's hidden what's in it.
Well, exactly.
That's true.
Every time you send her, or I never even get a response from Eddie Cheatham, but I've sent Sheila and Mike Holcomb and Mark McElroy, all our area representatives, and Eddie, emails about the private option and about term limits, and either you get thank you or I can't disagree
Right.
or nothing.
Right, but then this is what they do. The excuses are just too many. I used to bring a laminated map of the Capitol to these talks just because there'd be a legislator there, and I would circle the bathrooms. Because this is what they would inevitably. Tim, you don't know that first term. You're just trying to find the bathroom. And I go, here. I just was at the Capitol last week. It's not that difficult. Please. Don't wet your pants over it. But represent people, please. Represent people. That's all we're asking. I know you have questions for not only me, but Ken. So if you do have any questions.
Before you stop, I want you to explain again, because y'all both talk really fast. Tell me the organization that your brother works with, Initiative and Referendum is the name of it?
No, it's not. It's Citizens in Charge, but he helps Initiative and Referendum throughout the states.
Okay, wait a minute.
It's called
Okay,
Citizens
that's the
in Charge.
organization.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now tell me what Initiative and Referendum is.
It's where you can bypass the legislature and bring an initiative, which is a legislative act, or has the power of a legislative act, and you can put it on the ballot, and citizens can vote on it just like legislators vote on laws. And you can make a law. And if you get 10% of the signatures rather than 8%, you can put an amendment on the ballot.
So the people can go out and get signatures to
Right.
get issues put on the
Right.
ballot.
And legislators don't like that any more than they like term limits.
Oh, yeah.
They don't like that. They like you begging
Last
them.
summer, our T group and our leader, Nancy, who's not here tonight, went to about 5 different counties. Myra and Gerald went to cross it, and out in the heat, it was in July, I think.
We just didn't have enough.
Well, we had Patriot Camp going at the same time here in our Tea Party, so we were limited with time, but we went, some of us went door to door, we went to businesses, and how many signatures did we get, Levi? You remember?
I don't remember.
A lot. A lot.
It's not easy
How
work.
many, but we didn't get them statewide. We had numerous counties. Nancy and I set up at Atwoods one or 2 days getting signatures. Almost all day long we sat out there in the heat waiting for people to come in. Hey, come here and sign this. This is not Obamacare. And we had people sign, and I don't
It's
want it.
a
I don't
citizen's
want it, I don't want
right.
it. And it was just to get on the ballot. They said,
Right.
now, does this mean that we're not going to have Obamacare? I said, no, it just
Just get
means
on the
you
ballot.
get a chance to vote when you want it.
If we had a great court decision last week, I don't know if most people know about it, but initiative and referendum is something that scares the legislature. Really scared Oakland this time because that casino bill got almost on the ballot. Oh, we can't have people vote on it. So there was a push, and it was called SB 821, that you had to now register and give your home address if you were going to get signatures. You had to give the government your home address. You had to register with them. And there were some other restrictions. Well, that got struck down last week, thankfully. Yes, sir.
One clarification.
Yes.
If someone votes for the ethics and
The unethical
transparency.
amendment? Yes.
that is actually a vote to do away with the current version of term limits.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
That's
I just
exactly right.
so many times yes is no and no is yes. A vote for this issue is a vote to change.
is to more than double their terms. Exactly right.
That's what I
And
need.
I also mentioned, and we've talked about it, I think most everyone here knows it, but for every year they serve, they get 2 years worth of retirement credit. So if you work 16 years, you can retire with full credit.
I'm
Full
not.
retirement.
I'm not even going to speculate why they're doing it. I just know that it's anti-voter. It's against. They know the voters will on this. That's what gets me the most. There's no doubt about how the voters of Arkansas feel about this issue. And if that's the case, shouldn't our representatives represent us?
Exactly.